Romantasy, the child of two parents who couldn't be more unlike. And shit, they are fighting all the time. It's without doubt one of the hottest sticks within contemporary book publishing. Romantasy is a subgenre of fantasy where the romantic element is the driving force of the plot. Whilst the genres it derives from have long been established, romantasy in its current form just recently came into being, and it seems it is here to stay for now. The romantasy tag lives rent-free on TikTok and Instagram, and it has even been added as a specific category to the Goodreads Awards in 2023, with Fourth Wing being its first winner. The romantasy genre is also the bane of my existence. In theory, I like both romance and fantasy, even though I don't find myself enjoying a lot of contemporary romance books. However, both romance and fantasy stories are good if written well, and I want to preface this by saying I'm not an elitist. Whilst I do think that literary classics are classics for a reason, I like myself all sorts of books. It's the mix for me. Also, guilty pleasures exist. If the book hits for some reason, it hits. I just binged Max and Hall, the Prime Original series based on the book Save Me from Mona Kasten. Was it cringe and kinda bad? Absolutely. Did I eat it up and kick my feet in excitement? Yes. However, with a lot of romantasy entries that for some reason get extremely hyped and overrated, I keep asking myself, why is this stuff so popular? Are we reading the same books? Over the course of reading a bunch of these romantasy books, I have gathered a lot of thoughts. And before we begin, I want to state a disclaimer. This video will be filled with cynicism, and I will probably say a lot of things that are able to offend people who like the popular romantasy books that I will mention. If you love these books and if hearing negative things about them doesn't do you good, please don't watch this video, just skip it. You have free will and don't need to upset yourself. Also, I want to emphasize it is absolutely fine if you like these books. That doesn't make you inferior as a person in any way. It is a taste thing after all. Reading is supposed to be fun. I honestly wished I liked these books. I like fun. It's more fun to read things you like. This is not a hate video against book talk in general, nor people who like romantasy. It's about romantasy as a genre and the books within it. Since I dislike most of the popular entries of a subgenre to a genre that I like and care about despite its flaws, I want to talk about why and make some silly jokes. Not every single book is bad and the same, and I know the points I will make don't apply to every book, but I have read them often enough to be bothered. So please don't take this too seriously, and please don't send me death threats. We are no enemies to lovers, so no need for death threats. Let's start. The rise of new adult romantasy in the 2020s is kind of what young adult dystopians used to be in the 2010s. I feel like a lot of readers of ya-dystopia have even grown up to become new adult romantasy readers. If you think about it, a lot of those could have been sci-fi romance, since the romance aspect already used to be very prominent back in the day. And I'm not talking about the Hunger Games, which is a timeless masterpiece. The way these books were reduced down to a love triangle in marketing still makes me mad. Similarly to a lot of those novels, especially the rip-offs after the trend has had already hit its peak, for me it is extremely apparent that the whole world building is merely a vessel to convey a romance wish fulfillment story that falls apart once the author has to explain it properly. Beside that, to their core they are unoriginal, lackluster and uncreative, all besides shiny premises. I feel like with romantasy we've come full circle now. One of the biggest things that have been passed down genetically to the romantasy genre from the romance genre is its obsession with tropes and prompts as if to check them off from a list. Kind of like the tags in front of fanfictions. Do you want enemies to lovers, friends to lovers, grumpy ex-sunshine, fake dating and far weirder stuff that I won't get into? A lot of books nowadays seem to be written around tropes and prompts. To their core, these books collect a few tropes and have some lackluster characters act them out. and then it goes straight to marketing. It seems, however, that enemies to lovers is the ultimate seller. Undoubtedly, the biggest entries feature this trope, and I kinda understand that because I myself like the concept. I like a good enemies to lovers story, but it needs to be done well. And I feel like a lot of the really popular enemies to lovers romantasy books kinda killed the trope, and I will talk about why I think so later in the video. I read a bunch of high-profile book talk hype romantasy books with that trope. That be, for example, A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury, Fourth Wing, The Cruel Prince, Divine Rivals, and The Serpent of Wings and Night.
These delicious delights. Our deceitful demise. A harrowing of crowns and scepters. These vicious victors. A splaying of spleens and splodges. A raking of reams and rows.
And I must say, from alright to boring to straight up ass, I have had it all. Though I must say that these books do have positives, and I have started all of them without bias. Maybe not you. To a varying degree, these books also had qualities that I liked. Unfortunately, there were just very little considering the total count of pages I had to read to finish these. I gave each of them a fair chance, okay?
Hey, bitch, with a baddie friend, with a baddie friend.
Since romance is arguably a very big aspect of these books, let's see who we got as our romantic love interest. In Acotar, you've got Recent, who is a dark-haired, extremely handsome dude who appears to be very moody and also antagonizes and threatens our main character constantly and even drugs her in order to take advantage of her. In Fourth Wing, you've got Zayden, who is a dark-haired, extremely handsome dude who appears to be very moody and also antagonizes and threatens our main character constantly by constantly telling her that he will kill her. In The Cruel Prince, you've got Carden, who is a dark-haired, extremely handsome dude who appears to be very moody and also bullies and threatens our main character constantly by telling her she deserves to die because she's a human. And in Divine Rivals, you've got Roman, who is dark-haired and a handsome dude who appears to be very moody and also antagonizes. Well, he obviously falls for our main character in the first quarter of the book, so I don't really know about him, but you've got the gist. I also found this photo hilarious, so I wanted to share it. These love interests, especially the first three, are all roughly the same person. I find it absolutely astonishing how little creativity there is with writing a solid, compelling love interest in an enemies to lovers story without giving them this energy every single time. I myself, and seemingly everyone else too, imagined them as a bunch of fucking supermodels with angular faces, extremely defined jaws, full lips, and eyebrow lifts. You know how there's a thing about men writing women or a woman written by a man, and then you've got stuff like her titties bounced in unison and she had big boobs, a small waist and big hips or shit like that. And we agree that that's bad, right? This stuff is rightfully being criticized. I think, however, we should also call out men written by romance fantasy authors. It's equally as degrading to looks and a specific beauty standards. In a similar fashion, they get reduced to their body height, their sharp cheekbones and their big dicks. But really, it's almost every character in these books that is overly handsome. Reading these books makes you think you are playing with Barbie dolls, one prettier and hotter than the next. Except that Barbie dolls nowadays are way more diverse. I mean, this is supposed to be fantasy. Everything is possible with less explanation needed. And still, everyone here is a fucking white or slightly tanned supermodel. Also, same as with the YA books, no oldies are allowed. Well, yeah, the Fae people are fucking ancient, but they don't look old, okay? They look an appropriate new adult kind of way, so it isn't weird that the main character is like 19 and they are with a 500-year-old man. This might be just me after all, but how does anyone find this romantic? The men are all extremely buff with a noticeable emphasis on the big dicks. This is who y'all are into. You would think these characters have edges, but no, the main character, girly, being small and human and fragile, is not an edge, that is simply playing into the man big, woman small aesthetic. And it doesn't even have consequences, because the main character will still for some reason overpower all of her antagonists because of main character syndrome.
I hate this life. I hate being an orphan, and I hate being 19 years old, and most of all, I hate being a human. I wish I had been born 300 years ago before magic was wiped from the earth by the Great War of Magic of 300 years ago. You think the Great War of Magic 300 years ago could wipe out all the magic? Think again, sweetness. Okay, cool. Magic's back. Whatever. What does that have to do with me? What does this have to do with you? Everything. You're the chosen one that the prophecy is spoken of. You're coming with me. Me? The chosen one that the prophecy is spoken of? No. I'm human.
I remember when the first photos for the Cursed It Ends With Us movie started emerging, and people on TikTok were like, ew, it's so ugly, cast other people and make them wear prettier things. My guys, this is a story about domestic abuse. Are you good? Moreover, Lily Blossom Bloom is described to sell the ugliest flowers anyone has ever sold, and you seriously think that this girl wears stylish things? But I want her to look like this when he pushes her down the stairs. But I digress. The main girlies in these books are headstrong in a way that sometimes makes them act reckless in a really stupid way. And then the only reason they don't suffer from the consequences of their actions is because they are wearing huge plot armor. And don't come to me with the Farah is a strong female character. I will never forget how Sarah J. Maas' character assassinated Tamlin from the first Acotar book, so Farah could get together with Rhysand, who canonically has a bigger dick than the former, so it was never gonna last, guys. Tamlin, a completely lackluster, boring character in the first book, suddenly becomes a possessive asshole to our main girlie, so that Rhysand can save her and show her that she has free will and is able to choose for her own. First of all, I love how it's a man teaching a woman that she has free will to end it with a different man. Plus, last time I fucking checked, the same reason drugged her to make her dance in people's laps without her consent because of a dogshit plan of his. A true feminist icon. What a great story. Fellas, is it feminist to give head to your husband while people are dying because you're in the middle of a war? And also, talking about questionable empowerment stories, I know you exist. I know who you are. Yes, on the surface, these main characters are all strong-willed, brave and headstrong, but they are also all the same. Besides that, they have no other personality trait. Silver ombre hair isn't a character trait, Violet. And I think that's ultimately because, just like in dystopian YA books, they serve as the reader's self-insert in a book written to serve as wish fulfillment. I think ultimately the wish or the fantasy that is being fulfilled in the majority of these stories goes, despite being a regular girl or a girl with skills below average, to succeed no matter what and defy all odds, and with that to earn the absolute devotion of an extremely handsome man that seems to be unattainable to every other person. They are like stale bread that the reader can project themselves on. I don't know how people can care about these characters, truly. I don't care a bit about most of them. And that's also because I don't trust the writing enough to have the feeling that there's something unique or interesting to uncover with these characters, even though I have to read about them for hours. I don't think there's a lot to them despite some shallow features. I don't get to uncover interesting things, and no, uncovering that the baddie love interest is just a misunderstood goodie, that is not one of them, because it has been overplayed to death.
His name was Damien, or Xavion, or Jack of the Night, or something else that sounded dark and mysterious. He was a villain. But you know, not like really. He lived alone and he hated everyone, and he probably hadn't gotten laid in like at least 100 years. He had black hair and eyes like a stormy sea and a tattoo on his face probably, and he was super broody. When he wasn't spending long hours glaring at stuff in the middle distance, he was ordering mortals to have their heads removed, or pushing people away, or, spoiler alert, secretly fostering kittens. No one could figure out why he was so evil, until Eleanor came along.
Let's talk about the enemies being enemies. So much hate, they absolutely despise each other, right? Wait, what? They are both feeling intense sexual attraction from their first moment? Let's start with the unnecessary and one-sided bullying always coming from the man and being directed at the woman. Are they really enemies? When the girl is usually like fine with the guy and just continues to endure his antics all day? It's like, oh, he's kind of an asshole. Yeah, girl, he acts like a piece of shit towards you. All there is in these books is one-sided bullying because of fantasy, racism, or threatening someone to kill them because of politics or family matters that they personally don't even have anything to do with. It's not like the 19-year-old clearly confused girl so far did anything to you, and yet you continue to harass her even though it's very clear that she is an absolute piece of bread. The motivations are either really shallow or straight up dumb. One huge pet peeve of mine is that a lot of these enemies to lovers stories are an absolute fraud. I hate the moment where the enemies become lovers, and whilst the POV characters has been lusting since the first meeting, the other character is suddenly like, I wanted you all along, ever since I set my eyes on you. Are you kidding me? If you really hate someone, if you think they're like responsible for your mother's or brother's or whatever's death, you don't lust after them. You guys are not enemies, you are melodramatic and bad at communicating. And then all of the, wait, he isn't such a dick after all, he's just either misunderstood, traumatized, or can show his true nature for some reason. Wait, he's actually a good guy, thank God, because we can't have real character development. That is not allowed. This is bullshit. How about you learn that you actually like each other's personality and that you have similar opinions and views despite the world putting you in antagonizing roles? I want them to slowly learn how to trust each other and come to appreciate what the other person can do. Also, how about someone who might actually be unlikable gets time to redeem themselves and grow as a person? But no, let's just have them communicate like absolute fucking morons for 300 pages and then make out. What I noticed is, apparently there needs to be physical and sexual attraction from second one. And then, during the course of the book, you will have the most random plot devices to make the characters like horny or to test their horniness. Fucking dragons that make out with each other, and because you are connected to them, you also need to make out. Or a vampire who needs to drink your blood, which results in you unfortunately getting sexually aroused and want to make out. Or you drink blood because it has healing properties, and that also makes you horny. That's how fantasy goes nowadays, baby. Didn't you know fantastical things are just there to make you horny? I guess Cardan from The Cruel Prince comes closest to what I think enemies to lovers is, but I also think he's an absolute troll that bullies a girl that did absolutely nothing to him out of sheer racism. That girl is not antagonizing you at all, yet you decide to kick dirt into her food like a fucking child at the playground. Pick your fights, you dumb bitch. I'm not at all into this kind of middle school bullying, and I also don't find it romantic in the slightest. I don't buy this whole act. He is annoying, and also the book is really, really boring. This leads me to my next part. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. We all know that a lot of romantasy books have smut in them.
The only problem with fantasy fiction written by women is that there's a whole subsect of it. It is fantasy, but it is also and you don't know it's going to be because all the covers look the same. It's just rose petals and a sword. And they don't tell you in the description either. It will just say something like, Lysa was but a humble baker's daughter in the kingdom of Elysium. So you'll be sort of innocently reading along, and then, out of nowhere, it'll go, Lysa felt two-toned arms, grabbing her from behind. And on her lower back, she could feel his huge, throbbing cock. And you're like, whoa! What? Whoa! Go on. And then you're horny on the tube.
Smut in books is kinda getting out of hand, and the marketing is also targeting smut specifically more and more. There is a bunch of people on TikTok come to refuse to read books without sexual scenes in them. It needs to be spicy or they won't read it. Whilst everyone can read whatever they want, I honestly feel sorry for those people. You will be trapped to read mediocre to bad books without ever broadening your horizon, without ever knowing how it feels to read a truly good book. Call me old-fashioned, but I think like a really good chemistry between two characters can give you as the reader so much more than some just really mid sex scene. I care about the connection between two characters, and I feel like in those smutty books a lot of the time that's really not important. It feels like a lot of people don't really care about whether a story is well written or not, which in turn signals to the publishers that it really kinda doesn't matter. Little is enough, and as long as a certain set of boxes are checked off and the book has tacky sprayed edges, it will sell like crazy. I personally think that the sex scenes in these books are not written particularly well and are also kinda redundant. If you have read one, then you have read them all. I don't want to come at people who enjoy reading smut. It is absolutely fine. However, I think the way that smut is often incorporated into romantasy is the origin of a lot of narrative problems. Firstly, since smut is almost seen as a reward to a lot of readers, waiting for it seems to make them more and more impatient until they don't want anything else anymore. If you want to write a series of new adult novels, you better have smut in the first book already. I mean, fuck that. I need my instant gratification, at least in form of a constant sexual tension from the beginning to build up to the banging. But I think this leads to an early ejection. If you apologize my language, it is finishing early and then having to deal with an aftermath where holding up being enemies is not possible anymore, and also the pair kind of being in love now, and then it gets soppy real fast.
Let's fucking go. Let's go, I guess.
I also hate when people say a book is slow burn enemies to lovers and then they bang in the first book. That's not slow burn, guys. Fourth Wing is a book where this really bothered me. The Empyrean series by Rebecca Yarros is supposed to be 5 books total, and our main love interests are already banging it out in the second half of the first book. What the fuck are you going to do with them afterwards for 4 more books? Well, I guess make them fight with each other over random stuff. Oh, and have them miscommunicate. I don't know about you guys, but an on-off relationship with dumb fights is so romantic. You've got 5 books at your hands. Take your time, that's a privilege. Develop things. Make the readers wait for it. Base the chemistry between your characters off of their personalities and not off of their bodies. And when the love interests finally hit it off, it feels earned and like a journey where they found each other at the end. And then have them bang it out for all I care.
Now, if you're actually a person that likes Fourth Wing, if you genuinely like this book, let me ask you a question. Why does Xaden love Violet besides her being so effortlessly, mind-bogglingly hot to him? Like, why? Why does he love her? And counter to that, why does Violet love Xaden? There's no real reason. She is just the protagonist, therefore she is special and important, and the bestest boys are gonna be in love with her.
This is writing for instant gratification. Maybe I'm just too much of a slow burn kind of person, but I think you take the tension out of things with the characters almost immediately fucking each other. If you want to be more than erotica with fairy dicks, let the world and the fantasy story evolve on its own, without hyper-focusing on the sexual attraction of the 2 puppets with boobs and a dick. I promise there's more to it. Look, I am all for sexual liberation. Girly, get that ass. But I'm supposed to find these stories narratively appealing, am I not? There is a fantasy story in these books. A mediocre world has been built for me to lose myself in. But no, for me it feels like things happen so you can read glorified erotica and think, wow, this is somehow more meaningful than Margaret Malloy, My Tender Knight. Honestly, Ice Planet Barbarians at least doesn't act like it is more than smut with big aliens. I mean, look at those beauties. They know what they are. I kinda respect that. I'm looking forward to how many people will read the Empyrean series until the end. I have a strong divergent feeling with this one. I think it will lose itself in its own ambition. I haven't read Iron Flame, the second book, and I'm not going to, but I have already heard a lot of people, fans included, say that the second book is not as good as the first one. I have also heard a lot of people say it reads as if written by AI, and that really makes you think. Did you know, by the way, that Rebecca Yarros used to be a romance-only writer? Fourth Wing was her first fantasy book, and it came to be because her publisher wanted her to write romantasy since it is so popular. I think personally all of that shows in her writing.
I actually do cuss a little.
Do you?
Also, yeah.
What's your favorite curse word?
Probably fuck.
At this point, I want to talk more about the writing in these books. Of course, they are not all exactly the same, but some things seem to be in vogue with the genre. New adult is weird to me, because I feel like the writing hasn't evolved in any aspect other than there are now sexual scenes and swearing in it. It is still written like YA, except the characters bang and say fuck. It honestly still feels like it is written for teenagers, but not the Hunger Games kind of written for teenagers, but the other worse kind. The cheesy dialogues between characters, especially the annoying I hate you banter between the enemy love interest, that doesn't feel like two adults are talking to each other. The basic writing in these books often suffers from the overuse of superfluous, repetitive writing full of ellipses and em-dashes that often plague contemporary books. And while it already bothers me as cheap in the latter, I think in a fantasy setting it feels extremely off-putting. The narrative is filled with bad exposition through infodumps. Side characters will just infodump as if directly aimed at the reader, kinda like 13-year-olds write on Wattpad. And the switch in the main pair's relationship is so jarring. I call it from bullying to baby girl. First, you've got stupid remarks, maybe a dumb preschool nickname from the mean love interest, maybe one or two one-sided death threats. And then the unbearable sexual attraction leads to them banging it out. Enter annoying dirty talk and awkward horny writing. Y'all find this sexy? Honestly, a lot of these could be absolutely interchanged with each other and I wouldn't notice. They all have the same character voice. Afterwards, we enter the you're mine territory that I find really icky most of the time. This might be a personal preference as well, but I don't fuck with this possessive, almost love-bombing kind of relationship. At times, they are literally mated with each other, which I kinda hate because all the relationship building that I want in a romance can absolutely be ignored because they are meant for each other by fate. Oh, and have I mentioned that these books are mostly very heteronormative? And not only that, some even play straight up into gender existentialism by using words like female and man and females are this and males are that. I don't fuck with that personally and I don't find it hot. Also, the whole writing of these books shows very little subtlety in what it wants to convey. Everything needs to be spoken out loud. What is bad and what is good need to be clear. There can be no gray zones. Sometimes you will have the most outrageously bad antagonists, and also these books are full of plot holes that sometimes start with the very setup of the story. From a war college that pointlessly kills tons of perfectly able soldiers and also allows them to kill each other for no reason other than that the book seems like it has high stakes now, to made up curses that are specifically designed to guide the plot of the book.
It is so weirdly specific that she is basically writing the book herself. Ha! You fool! The only way you can break the curse is if a mortal human being falls in love with you. Ugh. Really? Are you serious, dude? And that human being has to explicitly say I love you. And this must be a human who has killed one of your kind. And she can only say I love you. I gotta write this shit down or something. And can you go back again? 10 inches length of hair. And when she says I love you, she has to be petting her head and rubbing her stomach at the same time. And she has to have at least 2 sisters and a single father. She cannot have a mother who's still alive because that is somehow relevant to the curse for some fucking reason.
Romantasy to me feels like romance that is dressing up as fantasy for fun without committing to the bit. It feels reverse engineered. It feels like the fantasy world has been constructed to be the frame around the romance, especially since in comparison to fantasy, romance typically has a pretty defined arc, which is the characters falling in love. I think using fantasy as a frame is to have other narrative possibilities than contemporary romance and to have higher stakes. Also to have different possibilities to make people horny. However, that means that these are romance books that could have the page count of a romance book, but instead have the like 400 plus pages of an epic fantasy novel. Also, I feel like all of the non-romance related themes do not evolve with the age of the audience. So you're left with a world full of war, racism, magic, and there's zero substance or commentary to it. It's just a shiny and shallow playground for the romance. I think that these books work well for when you don't want to deal with stories that are more hard to grasp and on the surface level give less back to you. But I find the gratification of a beautiful piece of writing or a well-constructed story with interesting characters way more satisfying in the long run. Also, I feel like a lot of romantasy books nowadays are just a quilt of all the ones that came before them. They put together stuff that has been done before countless times. I know that 100% original stories are not realistic, and that is absolutely not my requirement, but they really feel like they put these things together like a shape sorter. There is a reason why you can read these books in lightning speed.
It reads so much like an early 2010s YA fantasy book, but it's a new adult fantasy. This is actually very much a thing with, I think, a lot of books that get really popular on Book Talk, which I think makes sense because the demographic there, at least when Book Talk was first blowing up, was people who had just started reading, who had just gotten back into reading after not reading for a long time. And if you haven't read a lot of YA fantasy, I think you'd like this book because it's gonna seem newer and more exciting to you. But if you have read a couple of YA fantasy series, this is just like those. This is a book for people who don't read a lot.
And also why they are so beginner friendly. That is how they are designed. I feel like they put crack in these pages. I am not here to go like, unless you read War and Peace in the Russian original, you don't know what real literature is. Not at all. There is brilliant and thoughtful writing in all genres and levels. Take for example Avatar: The Last Airbender. That show was literally made and written for children, and it has way more nuance and interesting characters and concepts than all of these books together. So what does this bitch want then? I want the romance to be more of a side plot within a well-crafted fantasy story, especially when it's high fantasy. With urban fantasy I can cut some slack, even though I would still like the writing to be improved. But if there is a fucking map in front of the book or a stupid pronunciation guide at the end, I want you to commit to the story you're telling and write solid enemies to lovers, goddammit. Not this horny, bully, dirty talk bullshit. And take your time with developing feelings rather than telling me that they are all of the sudden heads over heels for another. Honestly, I think the Six of Crows duology by Leigh Bardugo is a great example on how to do it right. These are, by the way, also popular Book Talk books, so don't come at me for hating out of principle. They have 6 main characters and a lot of romance between them. There is pining and also real enemies to lovers. That is, by the way, my least favorite side plot, and still I wouldn't call Six of Crows romantasy. The romance plots are side plots. I know it is technically YA since some of the characters are like 17, but I think it is better written than most new adult that I've encountered. Also, the romance accompanies the main plot and what each character has to go through individually. No dicks are being shoved into your face. The characters are not not all bodily abled white people and like one slightly tan person, and they have their own wants and fears and interesting backgrounds that don't just revolve around their romantic interests. Also, I feel like with Cass especially, you could age him up to be older than 17 by the way he acts. So yeah, I think these books are extremely overhyped, even though I don't really like that term. I find it funny how there are people on Instagram or BookTok that act like they are critically engaging with these books. I found this video where someone presents polls about whether people think a book is deserving its hype or not, and then they give their own opinion. But with every single book, the answer is not overhyped. Wow, I'm so glad the hype is telling me that the hype is rightful. And this is how this yapping session comes to an end. What do you think about romantasy? What is your favorite romantasy novel, and should I give it a try because it might change my mind? Comment down below if you like. But until next time, thank you for watching.